There is a whole generation asking questions about how does building, how does urban development, how does urban planning, how does it affect the city, and how does it seek a long-term benefit, not just a short-term fix for something.
There was a lot of focus on the building, moving up through these incremental scales of learning, but focused on the building as the object. Now I think, in looking at Fed Square, it is about making cities. And I think a lot of the dialogue that happens with our students is trying to prepare them for that. What's your role as an architect in city making?
You know, we started the design 20 years ago. It was finished and the building opened 15 years ago. That was before they even had rating systems for sustainability, for Green Star and all this. And yet, at the very beginning, literally from the day we received the competition documents, we started working with our environmental engineers. We started working with our structural engineers. And so, you know, embedded in the very aspiration as well as the outcomes of Federation Square was an idea about sustainability, about making this, which it now is, a carbon neutral precinct. But we had to fight for that, you know. 20 years ago, gas was cheaper. The idea of storing rainwater wasn't necessarily thought about that much, and we had to embed that and keep fighting for those. Now they're seen as being very prescient, but it was part of an attitude that treated architecture as important but not singular, that architecture comes out of collaborative practices, and operating collaboratively across all of these different domains is what achieves something that has some sort of longevity and some sort of legacy quality within the development of a city.
So one of the big conversations that's happening at a city level is that Melbourne is these two polar worlds. We've got the CBD, the high-rise growth, really dominated by real estate and land value. You've got the suburbs that have been continually expanding, and we've now got these urban growth boundaries. So people keep talking about this idea of the missing middle. This idea of the middle ring, the middle suburbs, which are still within the transport corridor, the tram network, that's the opportunity for something different. New forms of housing, new forms of open space, new collaborative models of housing. What do you think about that future middle ring?
Well, it's certainly, I mean, it's an incredible both opportunity, but it's a real question, I mean, there are lots of different agendas that are happening. Some people don't want anything to change because it's lovely the way it is if you live in a really nice suburb and reasonably close in, and you have reasonable infrastructure and you have reasonable access to all the resources and facilities you need. But increasingly there's a disparity. And so again, if we talk about sustainability, it's not just about keeping the temperature up or down, it's also about sustainability of a lifestyle, sustainability of a family life. And if you have to travel an hour and a half each way just to get from home to work, then that's not sustainable. So irrespective of how much petrol you might use to do that journey, it's also about how it affects a family, how it affects family structure and cultural structures and stuff. So these are issues that have to go beyond just the physical fabric. It's the consequence of the physical transformation of the city that we have to understand, and that has to be forefront in this issue of sustainability.
I'm thinking back to a statement Aaron Betsky made about we've moved away from building now to city makers. The notion of making cities. So the idea of the architect, trying to understand the role of the architect. And I'm sure when you probably were going through education, similar to the way I was taught, there was a lot of focus on the building, moving up through these incremental scales of learning, but focused on the building as the object. Now I think, in looking at Fed Square, it is about making cities. And I think a lot of the dialogue that happens with our students is trying to prepare them for that. What's your role as an architect in city making?
Absolutely, but I think that move away from this sort of singular object is also a move towards understanding processes as opposed to singular designs. And in doing so, it means, I think, that our students at the MSD now have a much better understanding of operating multidimensionally, collaboratively, of seeing that inputs are not there at the end of a project, they're there at part of the generation of a project. And so it's important to have those networks, to have those connections. to be able to take a course where you're majoring in architecture, but you can take a property course, or you can take a construction course, or you can take a planning course, or an urban design course, or we're running studios where these disciplines are actually working together. And so it's moved out of that notion of pure individuality and singularity to operating as teams, to operating as multidisciplinary work groups. And in doing so, I think our students are thinking much more three-dimensionally. And by three-dimensionally, I don't mean just spatially, but I think they're thinking in terms of how projects happen, that it's a complex set of relationships that have to be managed, not the specific object that's managed.
So what do you feel is going on in practice, and how really do you think our graduates are going to start to evolve and to deal with that complexity?
Well, look, on the one hand, you're absolutely right. In a way, what it means to be an architect, or to be a landscape architect, or to be an urban designer, or an urban planner, and into construction, into property, these things are all up for grabs. All of these disciplines are effectively being redefined by the kind of disruption that's taking place increasingly throughout business and business models. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for how somebody thinks. You can open a portfolio and say, nice drawings, they've got all the skills to be able to document this, that, or the other, which are very valuable and useful talents to have in an office. But at the end of the day, you want to hire somebody who can think, and somebody who can look at a problem and see it from different points of views, not just do what they did on the last project in the same way for the first new project. So I think, our graduates, hopefully, we're able to instill in them this sense of critical thinking, independent thinking that's not based on necessarily what I would have done as a teacher, what you would have done as a teacher, but also have a broad enough experience and understanding to be able to have multiple ways to start to begin to work on a solution. And that for me is a kind of, an important way in which students can go into the world as employees and change the way offices themselves work. So it's not just offering up my skill base and saying, hire me because I have these skills. It's also, hire me because I can help you to do better beyond skill level. It's about way of thinking.